In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, these brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, Dustin Melbardis, Lizzie Haynes, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights to the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today is my good friend and co-host from deep in the heart of Texas, Mr. Dustin Melbardis. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear there, Russell. This is call sign Chapstick, keeping it cool down here in Torrid, Texas. Heard there's a truck heading out 281 306, veering towards Ranch Road 12, northbound for now, headed east around supper time. Come on back.
Well, we're going to have to call in some Southern Pride help here. We're going to have to go make this a big orange episode here. So,
You
a lot
got
of
it.
people, yeah, Dustin is a UT graduate. I am a University of Tennessee graduate as well. And joining us is another University of Tennessee graduate, Mr. Ben Ashley, coming to you from Charleston, West Virginia. How you doing, sir?
Hey, great. Go Vols. Excited to be here.
Go Vols! Get 'em, Vols!
In keeping with this, you know, we're all sports fans, all UT guys. Who's your favorite UT athlete? We'll go ahead and take Peyton Manning out of it because it just makes it a more interesting question.
Uh-oh.
Who's your favorite UT athlete, excluding Peyton Manning? So we're second choice.
Well, I got to say, I really like Arian Foster. He was a pretty decent running back when we were in school there. And then just in the last year or so, just in the last few months, he came out with the idea that the entire NFL is scripted like a movie.
That's right.
And on a podcast, he said, all the injuries are scripted, all the wins are scripted. And so keeping with the movie theme, I want to go with Arian Foster to answer this question. He was a great player, great running back, fantasy football star, absolute
Absolutely.
star. But what a character.
I remember him rip off a long run against Kentucky at Kentucky, like off a screen pass. He was great. I loved him.
Fantastic.
Dustin, same question to you. Favorite UT athlete not named Peyton Manning?
My answer is Chris Lofton during our
This
time
answer.
there, Russell.
Yeah.
I watched him hit a three from 26 feet out over Kevin Durant in Thompson Bowling Arena to take a 1-point lead over Texas with 18 seconds left. Durant came down and tied it, but we ended up scoring on every single overtime possession to win that game. And that was when they had Kevin Durant and DJ Augustine, maybe a couple other guys. But we had Duke Cruz and Wayne Chisholm and Dane Bradshaw. And just that team was so much fun. It was right at the beginning of the Bruce Pearl era. But Chris Lofton, for not having a NBA career really at all, his prime time was college basketball. And
He made it there.
he hit another game, like a game winner against Winthrop in the round of 32 or something. But Chris Lofton is probably my favorite.
That was a great choice, and that is high up on mine. Bruce Pearl was such an exciting thing to happen for the University of Tennessee sports there, for sure.
Right.
Last time they were number one.
Yeah.
Last time
And
the basketball team was top in the country.
so I'm going to go with Candace Parker, who,
Oh, yeah.
you know, when I got to Tennessee, the basketball program had not yet had Bruce Pearl there, so it was nice to, actually the women's games were actually bigger than the men's games at that time, and
That's
she
right.
came in able to dunk, and she's also just one of those really cool personalities. She's very articulate, speaks very well, and she does a great job on TV too. So that's one of those UT graduates that I always enjoy supporting.
And she's wonderful on Inside the NBA now. She comes on and helps out whenever Kenny's not around or Shaq's not around. I think she's so fun.
She's really good on that crew. So whenever she for sure packs it up and retires, I hope she's made a permanent add-on to that desk. So she adds more than Shaq does, who just mumbles.
That's great. I hope I do more than Shaq here in this podcast today. That's great.
Yes.
And here in our Shaq role is Ben.
Oh, that's great. I do want to touch on something that you mentioned. I came into University of Tennessee the same year you did, Russell, in the fall of 2003. The men's basketball team wasn't very good, but the women's team had just won like 6 national championships in the last few years. It was so hard to go to a women's game, but it was so easy and so fun to go to the men's games, not only because they dunked, but there were some amazing teams that came through there. Like we saw all the 2006, 2007 national championship Florida teams. We saw those Texas teams. Just some amazing basketball you could go see. Obviously, Tennessee, didn't win until Bruce Pearl came around. but it was great to be a Tennessee Vols basketball fan. If just a college basketball fan in general, those first few years, because there's some great players and great teams to watch.
Absolutely. And Rick Barnes did a great job with the team this year too. So
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some unfair stuff talking about Coach Barnes, and I do like the way he coaches. I will say I went to Dallas to see us lose to that Loyola of Chicago
Oh gosh,
team.
that was heartbreaking.
It was heartbreaking, and for a while there, I wasn't really on board with Barnes, but I think he's a good coach, and I like the way that this team plays for him. Losing Zakai Ziegler this year was rough, but I'm still proud of our boys.
yeah,
that win over Duke in the tournament was a lot of fun.
Oh God, we beat up that kid, Filipowski.
Yeah,
Euros Plastic beat him up. Are we going to do a basketball podcast?
I don't know. We could do that. Yeah, we could do that.
I guess we did watch a movie. Maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Patreon content. Ben, what is the last movie you saw?
Well, I've got a 4-year-old daughter, so I think you could sort of relate to this. I'm big into Disney princess movies, and the one we watch when we watch them all the time. But Moana has been my favorite lately. The Rock is Maui is awesome, and Lin-Manuel Miranda did the music, and so that movie is really, really great. It's making me want to go to Hawaii. So that's when I'm not watching dedicated movies for this podcast. I'm watching Disney movies, princess movies in general.
Nothing wrong with that. And Dustin, how are you?
I went and saw John Wick 4. It's been appointment viewing whenever one of these John Wick movies comes out. Probably the first time I went to the theater this year, actually, was John Wick 4. I will say I'm not enjoying them at the same clip that I was when the first two came out. Number 3 and number 4 are providing you what you want out of those movies, but the depth isn't there, and I think your brain gets a little tired seeing just how much action they pack into it. Plot is, I mean, who cares? And they know that. They don't really need to make anything make sense. We just kind of want to see Keanu play this guy. It was enjoyable, but it's not one I recommend.
For me, my last one, let's see, I watched Nebraska from 2013. It is a Will Forte movie and Bruce Dern movie. It is, despite having Will Forte in it, it's not a humorous movie. It's kind of a heartwarming movie. There is humor in it of a older dad character, grandfather era character who's not able to drive and keeps just walking out of the house. And he thinks he's won the sweepstakes contest. So he takes his prize money, or it's really a scam, unfortunately. And so his son agrees to finally take him to Nebraska to claim his winnings, even though it's not, just to basically keep him, to shut him up and to take him there. So it's a road trip journey between a son and his dad. And, the son doesn't really know all that much about his dad because he's been so closed off. So it's black and white. And, but he got nominated for Best Picture that year. It's just been one of those movies I always wanted to see because Will Forte is in it. I like my Saturday Night Live guys a whole lot. So
That's right.
That's
I would recommend it. It's an underrated movie. So,
Well, hey, and it's 10 years old, which means I'll watch it.
it is. Yep. And I'm not gonna lie. I watched it in preparation for. I tried to see all the Best Pictures nominees, and I just didn't see that one. So as we prepare for our end of year top 10 of 2013, I figured this was one I just need to sprinkle in there along the way. Now, Ben, what movie are we going to cover today?
Oh, one of my favorites, Smokey and the Bandit. I believe it was Billy Bob Thornton who's from the South, who said, if you're from the South, this is actually a documentary.
That's good.
This movie comes out in 1977. It is number 2 to only Star Wars that year, so it's a smash hit in the box office. It comes in ahead of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, so it is a massive success. This was only made for $4.3 million. That's not a big budget, and it grosses $126.7 million domestically alone, and it's amazing. This got released initially only in the South, and it did so well. Took it up to New York, and it did well there, and they took it out to San Francisco, and all of a sudden, everybody realized this movie was for everybody. It wasn't just for the South. So it is not rated that highly on IMDb. It's 6.9, but it is well liked amongst fans. The critics of Rotten Tomatoes give it a 78%, and the audience score gives it an 84%. So it is an Academy Award nominee, which you might not guess. It is nominated for Best Film Editing. And it is nominated for some of the AFI distinctions for Best Laughs, Thrills, and Heroes and Villains. didn't make any of those lists, but it's in the conversation at least for this. So, Ben, had you seen Smokey and the Bandit before?
Well, that's a resounding yes. When I was in school, I always did my homework well when there was something going on in the background, and this is one that I wore out. I actually did wear out Smokey and the Bandit 2 DVD. It was all scratched up from playing, but this is one that I've loved for a long, long time. It's a cult movie. There's a lot of fun. The stunts are fun. The love is fun. It's just a great all around movie, in my opinion. So I understand why it's not considered for all those awards for filmmaking and plot and things like that. The plot's very, very simple. I mean, the plot is as simple as it gets, but it sure was a fun movie, and it has been for a long time, and I think it still will be.
I don't know. I think Superbad starts off by just needing beer, and and it ends up being a great movie. So this movie just you need beer, and then you have a great movie. So
That's true.
That's really all you need for a great movie. Just the need to get beer and to get beer. Dustin, what about you? Had you seen Smokey and the Bandit before?
Yeah, I saw it on TV as a kid, and I will say that it didn't stand out to me at all. It was just, oh, this is an older movie, and it's on, so I guess I'll pay attention for a little bit or sit around. None of the nuance that I can view movies with now came to pass. I was just like, oh, cars, kind of neat. Like you could have had this on, or you could have had them Duke Boys on, and I wouldn't have really known the difference. I was just like, oh, this is just kind of an older car movie. But I was really happy to come back to it and sit down and take the time with it this time.
Okay, so it's a bit of a change then in returning to it. 20 years
It was
later.
forgettable. Like it wasn't really a part of my childhood. I just knew I had seen it.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I am my first time watcher of this one. I had not seen it. And to be honest with you, I'm not that versed in Burt Reynolds' movies. I had seen The Longest Yard, and I had seen Deliverance with him, as well as he pops into some movies later in his career where it's just like, hey, I'm Burt Reynolds, 10-gallon hat. Norm Macdonald. I know Norm Macdonald is Burt Reynolds better than I know actual Burt Reynolds is Burt Reynolds. So
I think people know Will Ferrell's Harry Carey way more than they know Harry Carey.
So I had a great time with this movie, and I'm starting to finally get the appeal to Burt Reynolds, and I would like to see more Burt Reynolds, actually. Yeah, so it's not just mustache enthusiasts across America who champion Burt Reynolds. This movie shows that he's one of those dudes that the guys kind of want to be friends with, and the girls like, at the time he was a hot commodity. So ladies want to be with him, guys want to be around him. So that's I think this movie is sold on him, and it works really well. It's so much fun. Too often, we sometimes diminish movies just for being fun. This movie is a whole lot of fun, and that's a really valuable thing for a movie to be. It's just action-packed fun.
A whole lot of fun and a whole lot of charm that I didn't get as a kid, but I definitely get now. And you could almost listen to this movie, and it wouldn't be as good, but you would feel the same feelings about sort of putting the relationships together. And once you know what's going on, especially considering the heavy reliance on the CB radios, I'm telling on myself a little bit. I watched it last week, but I listened to it while I was taking a long drive 2 days ago. Just kind of listened to the banter again.
I'm going to be really excited to get this one with you because this is a fun one. We probably spoiled the plot for you already, but there are spoilers that lie ahead. So for those who haven't seen this movie, you might want to check it out, and we will be back after these messages where we will spoil the movie.
Welcome to the All 80s Movies Podcast.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Jason, and this is the podcast where we talk about the blockbusters, the flops, and everything in between from one of the freshest decades for movies, the 1980s. So whether you're a brain, a jock, a valley girl, or a Jedi, we've got some 80s classics for you.
Do these movies stand the test of time? Are we discovering something new? Is there an 80s movie we're finally watching for the first time?
Join us each week as we dive into the cinematic nostalgia that inspired and influenced a generation. From the hits to the cult classics, we'll discuss our earliest memories, favorite scenes, fun facts, and our not-so-favorite movie moments, too.
It's the All 80s Movies Podcast, now available on all major streaming platforms. Please subscribe and happy listening.
All right, we're back, and this is your final warning. There will be spoilers that lie ahead. Dustin, for those who haven't seen Smokey and the Bandit since 1977, do you want to give people a refresher?
There's only so much celebrating you can do in Georgia with that white lightning and Pabst Blue Ribbon. We got to get some of that golden Colorado Coors beer, and we got to get it fast. From the furthest place east we can, Texarkana. This is the goal of Big and Little Enos Burdett, and they task the one and only Bandit Darville to go and do it for $80,000. Bandit enlists the help of Snowman, his friend Cletus, to go and make the run. Easy enough, they don't even got to pay for the beer. But on the way back, they are ambushed by a bride in the middle of the road, Carrie, and Bandit can't help but leave her there. We learn that she has just dodged a wedding to Sheriff Buford T. Justice's son, Jr., and he's hot on the trail to get her back. Is it ever more appropriate to simply say, hijinks ensue, as Snowman, Bandit, and Frog, real name Carrie, race through the Deep South on their way back to meet the deadline, dodging the highway patrol and the ever-dogged Buford along the way. As they get closer to their destination, Bandit's reputation and popularity over the CB airwaves gather some allies to keep the county Mounties off their tail until they make the delivery, hop in a new Cadillac, and accept a new deal to race up to Boston to get some clam chowder.
All right. So, Ben, why don't you start us off here? What drew you to this movie that makes you, you help us select the movie. So what's drawing you to this one?
Well, I think it's obviously the action with Burt Reynolds, the beautiful Trans Am that he drives throughout the movie, the really cool truck that he has. But at the time I started watching this was also the time that I myself was on quite a few beer runs. Didn't always have to travel to Texas to get Coors Light. In fact, I believe it was 1985 that law or whatever that law needed changed allowed that West Coast beer or Western America beer to make it this way. But when we were in college, we were always on beer runs, and so how about a movie that's full of action? That's where a guy's driving a Trans Am to lead a truck to outrun the law to get that for to put a few dollars in his pocket. I just thought the whole action, the whole adventure, the crashes, the jumping the bridge, all those things just sort of drew me in, and the fact that it's just over a simple beer run. Such a fantastic movie.
Yeah, simple beer run. You nailed it before the break. The plot of this movie is simple, incredibly so. And that doesn't take away from your enjoyment of this. It makes it easy for you to just kind of sit back in your couch and take it in. But yeah, the premise of we need you to go and get this beer. I suppose we do start with a very short scene of somebody else who's trying to do it but got caught. I don't think we get much explanation as to why it must be done in the way that it's being done. And that's okay too, because all it gets us is it gets Snowman and Bandit on the road faster.
Yeah, I think it had to do with the development of the refrigerated truck.
There we go.
Coors couldn't guarantee the freshness of their beer for that long in a hot truck that's been trucked all over the South. And so, if you think about how refreshing it is to drink that Colorado Kool-Aid, now they make such a big deal even today about the mountains being blue on the can, how fresh it is. Right. Just the idea of a big cross-country beer run with your buddies to make a few bucks it's just so fun. Plus, there's a whole nostalgia part too. I mean, the scenery of the 70s, what a wild time. You couldn't do that today. I mean, you absolutely couldn't do any of this stuff today. But it's just absolutely hilarious and fun.
It sounds like it struck people by a little bit surprise too. It was I think Billy Ray Cyrus said it's required viewing for as a Southerner. But I found it interesting that this was not expected to have the national appeal that it went on to have. And I did find myself wondering, I said, if you made this today, is this going to work in New York and in Boston and all over the country and be the number 2 movie? And in general, comedies don't tend to be as big on the box office anymore. This one does have the action to kind of propel that. But it's really interesting to see how this exported this. It's very, very Southern. All the characters are very, very Southern. And it's stepping into that world a little bit. And I think that's one of those really cool things. Burt Reynolds said it's a rainy day, Saturday afternoon movie. It's a little like Chinese food. After about an hour, you see this, you want to go see another. I don't know. He's pumping up his own movie, but gosh, that description for Burt Reynolds is just that bravado he just walks around with. He brings it in this movie. And this movie is just so carried on the back of Burt Reynolds, I think. His personality. Dustin, had you seen much Burt Reynolds before?
No, although I will remind you that if I had to recast anyone in Star Wars A New Hope, I was saying that Burt Reynolds should be in the cockpit of one of those X-Wings, because I think you'd succeed. if you had the Bandit coming in on that run. No, I wouldn't say that I have much of a history aside from, I think you mentioned The Longest Yard and Deliverance. Those are the two that stand out to me. That sort of bow fishing scene is something that, like that character makes sense. I'm not going to push back too hard, but I would say Burt Reynolds helps carry this movie, but it's not like he's doing a lot of heavy lifting. He's got a wonderful supporting cast. It's not, I don't think this is the Burt Reynolds show. I think he has the gravitas as an actor, and they write the supporting characters as to being sort of in awe of this legend. It's pretty nice to have a big hotshot actor playing a legend instead of playing a nobody. He's well known, he's well liked, and he's got the charisma to earn it. We're very lucky to have Buford T. Justice as his antagonist, to have a friend character like Jerry Reed's Snowman, and then to have Sally Field in the passenger seat. I don't think he has to champion this movie that hard. It was all the table was set for him to very easily, casually stand out.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like Dustin is saying that this is more of an ensemble effort here. Is it the Burt Reynolds show for you?
Well, I agree, but also standing on its own is the music from this movie. Jerry Reed is a country music Hall of Famer, and this song Eastbound and Down was written very quickly, but it's one of, I would guess, the top 10 songs of the 1970s. I mean, it stands strong today. It's well written. The song follows the simple plot to a T, but it's so catchy, such a great tune. And Jerry Reed at that time in the country music scene was as hot as it gets. He even had a song called "When You're Hot, You're Hot" around that same time. So, Jerry Reed to me is, and I believe he was originally going to be cast as the Bandit until Burt Reynolds finally said yes. So I guess, they moved him over to being the Snowman.
Yeah, in which case you just tip your hat and say, okay, yes, right this way, Mr. Reynolds.
That's right. But, Jerry Reed is just absolutely fantastic. And I do agree with, I believe this isn't a great ensemble movie. And then if you look at Sally Field, she was a big star at that time. She was known for smaller roles and as sort of a kid in a bunch of movies, and after this movie, she becomes a sex symbol, a symbol of beauty, a symbol that, if Burt Reynolds likes her, she's got to be great, good looking. So, and then of course, Buford T. Justice. That's Jackie Gleason is a multi-decade TV star, great comedian, and just brings so much as the actor on the antagonist side. And I believe this is a wonderful ensemble movie.
Well, maybe it is more spread out now that you guys are mentioning it. I will admit the biggest laughs in the movie I got from Buford T. Justice and his reaction to what's going on. I do find, to your point, Dustin, having this be a living legend is pretty funny because you don't think of smugglers as being somebody that you champion or know around town, and it became humorous. It kind of grew throughout the movie. We knew we were calling the Bandit in at the beginning. He has a reputation for being able to do this, but then by the end of the movie, you have teenage girls holding up a sign at like the drive-through, or like he's calling in people on the CB radio, being like, "I could use you to slow down the cops here." And everybody in town, no matter where he goes, like, "That's the Bandit? That's so cool." And you're right, there does begin to build up this joke of like, okay, this is beyond being, I know a lot of people, or I'm an extrovert and I'm a man about town. Like this notion of everybody just thinks he's awesome. It's even more so than the Fonz. Like, I always wondered, like, why does everybody think the Fonz is so cool? If somebody just pops a leather jacket on and walks around town, and can they be that cool? And everybody, it just becomes a self-growing thing of like, the Fonz is cool. Didn't you hear? No, I didn't. Oh yeah, you're right. He is cool.
Oh yeah.
I've been told he's cool. So I think the Bandit's kind of like that. And I think both in the case of the Fonz and Burt Reynolds here and the Bandit, I think those are very funny.
To that point, I also want to say, if you think about what became a viral sensation at that time, today it would be something, going viral on social media. Look at all these people. There's a million tweets right now about this particular person. But back at that time in the South, it was created by the CB radio. If something was going on, you'd radio on up ahead, and everybody on up ahead would hear that. And so I'm sure that's how they assumed that spread in the plot of the movie. But there wasn't the cell phone back then. There wasn't Facebook
Right.
and any of that, of course. So then if it wasn't on live TV, the word was spread like wildfire through the CB radio. And that's such a cool lost. I guess it's lost. I don't know many people other than truckers today that still use the CB radio.
Well, it's kind of something that Russell was saying about championing the outlaw. Maybe there might not be any better place than the Deep South to do that. To have an entire part of the country that really holds in high relevance, like their rebel spirit. You have the idea of moonshiners and people that are trying to do their business outside of the reach of the law, and then smugglers or bootleggers. Boy, this movie does a really good job of teaching you, if you did not know what this was, this is why it's illegal. I think 3 times in the first 18 minutes. Something like, uh-oh, well, east of Texas, now that's bootlegging. It's sort of like, oh, okay, thank you. And when they distribute the movie wide to the rest of the country, oh, okay, now we know what the stakes are here. I think of other like movies in the South. I couldn't help but think of, oh, brother, where art thou? Like, oh, these guys just run off the farm. And there's kind of there's the ones that want to assist in apprehending. Those are few and far between. Most of them are just like, oh, I just need a hot meal, like help them out, bust these chains off. So I can see that this setting, this environment is almost perfect for this kind of movie or this kind of character who, like I say, it doesn't have to try hard to be cool. He just kind of already is. And the whole look, his mannerisms, and his savvy. He's the Southern Han Solo.
You know what? Before this movie, I think I would have said, you wash your mouth out with soap. But like I said, I'm starting to get the appeal of Burt Reynolds. I'm starting to. You said that in the Star Wars episode, and I was sitting there going like, Burt Reynolds in this movie? And all I can see is Norm Macdonald with the giant foam hat on the, like in an X-wing cockpit going
I knew it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm starting to see it now. It's more believable. So the motivation for Bandit to pick up 400 cases of Coors beer at its semi-valued at $80,000, that's $200 a case, $16 per bottle is what this would break down to. So it doesn't exactly make sense that they would do this, but who cares? We're having fun. But to that notion, I think you guys pointed out that it was bootlegging. President Eisenhower and President Ford both had this flown in on a plane for them at the White House. So this does actually have some draw. It's funny. It's hard to connect that at this point, the seriousness of it. But I'll admit, I think Hitchcock calls them a MacGuffin. It doesn't matter what it is. We don't care what it does. It's just everybody wants it. And not everybody's trying to get the beer in this case, but it's a strong enough indicator for all the fun action that's going to ensue. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, not everybody wants the beer per se. It's not like the treasure that everybody's pursuing. Obviously, tracking down and catching the bandit is kind of the big name of the game, but in a similar way, it's not a MacGuffin in its particularly, but it kind of works in the same way. And it's amazing how something so simple can still bring such joy.
It's also like not for everybody, right? It's not like he's dropping off a couple cases here or there, like, hey, thanks for your help, have a beer. This is for just 2 guys, Big and Little Enos. I mean, yeah, they're throwing a big celebration at the rodeo, but the idea that like I'm taking this job for just some wealthy clients, that might go against some other outlaw or renegade type characters like turned pirates or Robin Hood. That might go against like the Robin Hood archetype of like give to everyone. Like he's just there for a job. I know me and Brian have talked about this before, specifically on the Ronin episode. Is sometimes the job is just the job, and it's the action of fulfilling it that is what's intriguing, not necessarily the cargo itself. Now, I will say the sheer amount of what they had to get does allow this movie to do something that I would have never thought mattered, as an adult, which is this movie isn't as good without the necessity for the big rig, for the truck. If it's just the cars, then we're looking at 1970s Fast and Furious or Gone in 60 Seconds. Having the Trans Am and Snowman in the truck, now that is where we get some real like. I had friends that went to UT with us who, after graduating, went on to be truckers. Like, this is kind of a Southern thing. So I thought that was wonderful, too. And that it added to how fun this movie should be.
Well, I think paralleling with some of the the ideas behind having that glorified can of Coors Light. That the brand loyalty is still a big thing today. Even you know even with beer a few years ago. I remember when we were at Tennessee, probably our sophomore year or something like that, around 2005. Yuengling hadn't made its way south yet.
I know exactly what you mean here, Ben.
Yeah, you couldn't buy Yuengling beer that far south. I remember in Morgantown you could, but not down in the volunteer state.
We had to get up to Abingdon, Virginia to get some of that Yuengling.
Yeah. So I guess there are some distributorship rules and regulations that are still in play, crossing state lines and whose territory is who or whatever. But so that's still true today. And then also, kind of anecdotally, I have one of the things I do in my spare time is I have a first grader that I mentor, and he and all of his friends go absolutely bananas over this little drink called Prime. It's a sports drink that Logan and Jake Paul or whatever. I don't know.
I've seen it. Yeah, I know what you mean now.
I brought a bottle in there today, and those kids went absolutely nuts. I mean, you'd have thought I had a Coors can of beer in the Deep South in the 70s. I mean, it was crazy. Every little kid was like, "Can I have some? Can I have a bottle of that?" But it was pretty cool. But yeah, there's something to that sense of I have something that you can't get easily. And I think the same is true today if you're searching for bourbon. There's so many good cheap bourbons you just simply can't get because the demand is too high. And so I'm a bourbon aficionado myself, but there's some things like Weller and Eagle Rare and things like that you just can't find in the store. But they're only like $20-$30 a bottle if you do find it. So it's not simply because of price; it's just availability.
Yeah.
One of the things that makes this movie very enjoyable, Sheriff Buford, T. Justice here. Ben, what makes him fun?
Oh, he's just so abrasive, so repulsive, not afraid to be offensive. I mean, he says some things that you absolutely cannot say in this 21st century, and
Right.
You get away with it because it's an older movie, I guess. But you just want that guy to lose, and
I think they did that then though too, wanting you to make him dislikable. He's kind of outwardly bigoted. He's kind of chauvinistic. He thinks so highly of himself with an arrogance that he's above everybody and in a position of authority, no matter what era you're in. That's always repugnant. So I mean, I think he's driving into that so hard that it becomes a parody and it's very funny. I think you could get away with it today, don't you? I mean, like what he's doing is wrong, and he doesn't pan out for him. It's almost like you're painting the picture of somebody who's bigoted and fails, and he is an idiot because of this.
Yeah,
part of being an idiot.
Well, sure. I meant more of what he said doesn't translate into some of the offensive things. I'm not going to repeat here on this podcast.
Yeah, there's several things that should not be said.
That's fair.
But the idea of the heel, my buddy years ago told me when I was big into watching WWE that the best wrestlers, the face wrestlers, are so good because the heel is so bad. You want that strong divide between the good and the bad. So the stronger of a role that you have on the heel side of this movie, the antagonist, the sheriff, the more it props up the good side. So I think that is a nice balance because everyone loves the Bandit.
The chemistry that Sally Field has with Burt Reynolds is also very enjoyable. I don't know if you can feel it or not, but there's an actual real life romance that starts to kindle between these two. I don't know if that shows through on the screen for you.
My first show ever on this was we looked at a Matt Damon, Emily Blunt romance in The Adjustment Bureau. And one of the things I had to say about that was that it seemed real. And this one does too. Not quite the same. Obviously, those movies are, I think, 34 years apart. But the idea is when you can see it, all of a sudden the acting becomes way easier. And every little scene that you have them together, whether it's just playful banter, kept to short quips, I believe we get a little bit of Frog having kind of a motor mouth and she wants to just kind of keep talking. I believe one of the things she says, like, do you find this fun? What, driving or talking to you? I find them both challenging. This is, in a way, framing this character as a little fast-talking. She's mostly comedic. There's not too much depth to her, and gives a perfect reason for Buford to be following, Buford and Junior to be following. This movie probably doesn't make as much sense or has the tight connection that it does if it weren't for this bride in the middle of the road who comes along for the journey, who ends up loving this lifestyle quickly, even tells us, the audience, she lets us know, I really just wanted an excuse to stay in the car. I didn't want to leave. This is too much fun. And we as the audience are saying, thank you. Yes, we want to see you there too. So absolutely lovely chemistry. And I think she nails her comedic spots. She's sweet when she needs to be. And I think if you have a director who's focusing on fast car chases and sort of the manly main actors, that to have the sweetness in her character come out in her comedic wit, that's kind of a tour de force. I maybe would not have expected that kind of attention being paid. I thought it worked well.
You kind of felt sorry for her because she said she was a traveling dancer and she was going from show to show, road show. I think she was at some home warehouse show when she met the good looking, although not a whole lot upstairs, sheriff's son. When it got time to walk down the aisle, she ran. And so she was looking for something different, looking for something exciting, and she ends up being charming. And I thought it was very, very cool that even though they're on this, cross-country race, they still found time for a nice romantic walk in the park. And
Right.
that was super sweet. You saw their love there. And Snowman's dog ran off too.
She's important though, because without her, she's new to this world, like you mentioned, Dustin. She's our experience reflected into this movie. We're not familiar with this world, I don't think. Most of us have just hopped in the car with a bootlegger and driving at high speeds, evading the cops and crossed multiple state lines. So for those of us who haven't experienced in that, we're
on
riding
the record. On the record, Russell, that's correct. On the record, no, I don't have any experience with that.
So it's funny. It's through her eyes that his charm and his confidence draw us in too. So it's not just doing it for her. It's us getting like, oh, we find out a little bit more as this movie goes on who this Bandit guy is and what a big, hilariously random fan following he has. So, and she's, everybody wants him, and somehow that makes her want him too. So, like I said, it is the Fonz ism. Like it's like at some point he's like, "Haven't you heard I'm a big deal?" No. Well, look around. I'm a big deal. Oh, ooh. It's like, I didn't know you were a big deal. I like that. So, because he even says he's like, I just go from town to town doing what I do best. What's that? Showing off. You're good at that.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of moments to show off his natural charisma and charm, but he's not overdoing it either. He doesn't have his arm around every lady. Yes, over the CB radio, we get the idea that he has had past relationships, whether professional or otherwise, with some of these other ladies, but that's not an integral part of his character. He's just attractive to everyone based on his prowess, his skill, his cunning, all that stuff. He doesn't need to be like outwardly, in the hot tub with a cadre of ladies. Like he's just already that cool.
I have to admit, I'm a big James Bond fan, as probably anybody who listens to this podcast knows. Jackie Gleason gives me the additional helping of Sheriff J.W. Pepper that I've always wanted from the man with the golden gun. I just, they're very much cut from the same cloth. I can't help but think Jackie Gleason would have seen this and it entered his head a little bit. Jackie Gleason's reactions are just very funny, and it's interesting. I've seen The Honeymooners. From what I've seen of them, I didn't see this coming. So it's a perfect fit. But gosh, he's good. He's not even nice to his own son.
No, he's not.
Like he's not even a little bit nice. It's like
he barely tolerates him.
Yeah,
and he's driving all across 700 miles east because Carrie had the gall to walk out of a wedding that he spent $40 decorating the whole town for. No one's going to make a fool of my son.
But I thought the craziest thing he said throughout the entire movie was, I guess when they wrecked in the creek there at the end, he said something like, "Son, remind me when we get home, I'm going to punch your mother right in the mouth."
Right in the mouth.
There's no way you're from my loins.
No way you're from my loins.
Yeah, that character probably could have stood to be developed a little bit more, Junior, but it's okay that it wasn't. It's really
I don't know how much development he has.
Well, in the second one, he wasn't really developed either. I mean, just a little bit, but yeah.
he's kind of just along for the ride, which is funny. Think of Buford telling him like, "Go put the evidence in the car," and he like has it sitting there in the front seat. Put it in the back of the car. Yeah, it really creates. It's nice that he has someone in the car with him to bounce his comedic stylings off of, including like over the radio with the other sheriffs in the area or with the person at the choke and puke, the truck stop or the bus stop, whatever you want to call it. His interactions are, I'm not going to say they steal the show because there's a lot of show to go around, but he is an enjoyable character. And I think that the Buford T. Justice character either creates or solidifies that archetype of the style of, we'll say, overweight. Well, that's part of it. Overweight, like dangerous sheriff who like has all these resources at his control. And we think of Boss Hogg from Dukes of Hazzard. You think, hey, you brought up the WWE. They made characters around like this kind of guy. So like it like to be an archetype creating role. I mean, think of it like the Terminator or Danny Ocean. Like there are certain archetypes that exist because of movies. And I didn't come into this podcast thinking like, oh, that's something I wanted to harp on. But really, Sheriff Buford T. Justice, like exactly the type of character you're talking about. And it's all thanks to a movie that came out 45 years ago.
He is, I think one of the reasons that he would work today again is you could see him, over the CB radio talking to, we see as an audience that it's a very intelligent, competent, much better at his job probably than Sheriff Buford T. Justice is. It's a black man on the other end of the phone. And when he meets him in person, he exhibits, this, what is this world coming to kind of thing. And, and
Right.
he even stutters over himself. He's like, I thought you'd be shorter. Like,
Right.
it's just, he treads the line of, I think at the time these things weren't received that well either, which in credit to this movie, that was a black character who was put in a position of respect and intelligence. His vocabulary through him is not germane to the situation. The Germans don't got nothing to do with this.
Right. Well, just 10 years earlier was the, I believe we covered it last year, the Professionals. We have a situation where we're dealing with Mexican main characters and one or two, I think just one black member of the crew. And the character who was talking to Lee Majors says something offhand, a small racist comment. And even just a small comment is enough for audiences at that time to say, oh, no, we're not down with that. Because
Exactly.
These outlaws are not down with that. They're more about brotherhood. They're more about can you do the job? And so this is 10 years later now, and we're talking about the Deep South. We all know those people. I certainly do. Who some of the terms he uses, or there is a little bit of a sight gag where we're talking about like, oh, I thought you'd over the radio. I thought you'd be taller, or whatever that line is. And he's standing over him. He actually starts that conversation off with calling him boy. Like there's
Yes.
some things that we know. Like it's not just a little bit. It's a lot of the stuff we don't like, and it does a great job of reminding us that even though he's funny and we enjoy the time that we see him on screen, which I think this movie does a great job of, is we enjoy the time that everyone's on screen. There are times in crime movies or thrill movies where when someone's on screen, you get uneasy or uncomfortable. We understand that he's bad, but we like when he's on screen. That's tough to do.
To your point, Jackie Gleason was a big part of what made this work. This movie is underwritten, perhaps no surprise here. Hal Needham is not necessarily a screenplay writer nor a director. He's a first time in both of these positions. So this is something that Burt Reynolds, as well as Sally Field, in their back and forth, pays dividend to through improvising, but also through Jackie Gleason doing it. There was nobody written to be in the car with him, which I can't even imagine.
Wow.
Because you don't get to not like him as nearly as much. I mean, there's just so many things he does to his own son. Like he's like, hold my hat. So the top of the car gets ripped off. And he goes, hold my hat. And so his son puts his hand on his head, and his own hat blows off. Seconds later, and he goes, Daddy, my hat blew off. He goes, I hope your head was in it. So, I mean, he's completely selfish as well, and obsessed. And it's very funny to watch him. do this. And Jackie Gleason is a comedic genius if you've seen his previous work. And as you pointed out, Ben, his multi-generational talent, he brought so much to the writing of this. So, I mean, you could see somebody making comments about, whether it be minorities, stereotypes, ladies or anything like that, and coming off as being, it worked in Anchorman, watching Will Ferrell go like, a woman newscaster. And so you start to turn on them because of that. Jerry Reed, not somebody you think of as an actor, Ben. He actually pulls his weight pretty well here, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, I feel like he was a natural fit. He's a great musician, great country singer. I understand he could play about any instrument you ever put in front of him, and he's got just a great wit, a great sense of wit to him. I just love the not just Jerry, but also the CB radio language that he sort of brings us into. There's always a second meaning behind everything. We talked about stopping at the choking puke and putting some groceries down my neck. I started saying that all the time to my wife afterwards, and when we were on a road trip and need to stop and get some food and stuff, and she's like, "What in the world?" But that's
yeah,
how they
don't know.
Yeah, that's how they said things. But there's just so many things that Jerry brings to the table. He's a country music Hall of Famer. He's a tremendous musician, tremendous songwriter, and just a real great voice of the South at that time, who is just hard not to like.
Well, let's talk about the guy who created this thing a little bit. Hal Needham. He's a stuntman. He trains under John Wayne, which, that'll make it cool right there. And, he's stunt double for Chuck Robinson, quickly became one of the top stuntmen in the 1960s. He actually became the highest paid stuntman in Hollywood. And so this is him branching out. He doubled for Clint Walker and, more importantly, Burt Reynolds. So Hal Needham was so close to Burt that when he got divorced, speaking of a divorce, Burt Reynolds said, "I got a big house. Why don't you live with me?" Well, Hal got a pretty good safety net there. Not only did he get to stay with Burt Reynolds, he did it so for 12 years. And it's funny, there's two conflicting interviews here where Burt Reynolds is like, "Oh, he's a great guy. I mean, he lived with me for 8 years." And then there's another interview that cuts in and Hal's laughing and goes, "He has the worst memory ever. I stayed with him for 12 years. So be careful if you invite Hal Needham to stay with you. It could go a little bit longer than you might be thinking. But as I was reading the story, it reminded me of this. And it is not a shock that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Tarantino movie, Brad Pitt's character is based on Hal Needham and his relationship to Burt Reynolds, the actor.
That's cool.
And their kinship of that. And honestly, as they were telling me the story, I was just like, I couldn't not picture the dynamic that those two had. And sure enough, Quinton took influence from that in his movie. And it's interesting, as you mentioned, not only was this written for Jerry Reed, and he so smoothly, debatably fits like a glove into the other roles so quickly and easily. He showed the script to Burt Reynolds, his friend, and he said, "Yeah, I'll be in this movie." He's like, so, and they were off to the races. They had a real movie with Burt's backing. So they asked who they wanted to be the love interest. He said he wanted Sally Field, and the studio fought him. They said, "Sally Field's not sexy." No. And to Burt's credit, he said, "You know what is sexy? Talent. She's good. You should put her in there." And I think that's the movie you want to do. And if you want Burt Reynolds, that's who you get. And so when it came to who to direct this movie, Hal Needham wrote this thing, but Burt said, "I think you could direct it." So, I mean, Burt's confidence in people to do things that they're not normally doing, whether throughout this movie, just made so many things that we've talked about throughout the course of this podcast come to fruition in the making of it. And, who better to direct a movie like this than somebody who does the stunts themselves and they know what it takes to make them work. And so, I don't know. We've talked a lot about the laughs. We've talked a lot about the characters. Ben, this is an exciting movie too, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of, the stunts are what makes it exciting. But in reality, you're kind of faced against the clock here. Are they going to make it back to Atlanta in 28 hours? Are they going to be able to outrun the sheriff? Will they be able to celebrate with Coors Light when driver wins the Southern 500. So I think there's obviously a lot of depth to this movie, way more than just comedy. But there's I think of the scene where that the cop car lands on the moving bed of the truck.
Right.
That's a nice stunt, by the way.
Yeah.
They did that.
And then, of course, the big one was jumping the bridge, the Trans Am jumping the bridge. Jackie Gleason's character driving the cop car that has the top completely shaven off and the door's missing. And by the time he gets to Atlanta, that thing's barely running.
This is evidence.
Yeah.
That was a good slow motion cut, though. Like when the car actually gets
the
ripped
words out of
off
my
there,
mouth, Russell.
it looks so good.
The slow motion was also really well done for the jump because it's not that slow. It's not $6 million man slow. It's just slow enough to see the wonderful jump, and then we follow that up with the two cars that can't make it. They do another jump onto the football field. The car stunts. I think I'm becoming because I am not a car guy.
I'm not either.
Nor am I a racing guy. But I believe every car chase scene I see becomes something more that like I'm excited to see. And so when Smokey and the Bandit comes across our desk, I go, ooh, I think I know a little bit of what we're going to be in for. And to be excited, gosh, there's no greater feeling than seeing that standstill shot of those mailboxes right before they get destroyed by that Trans Am. Or talking about we have kind of a solo scene with Snowman in the bar or some type of bar where Fred supposedly bites that one gang. He gets beaten up pretty good. I mean, he's not some type of superhero with like combat prowess. He kind of gets beaten up. So what does he do? He just pays for his gas, gets up in his rig, and just demolishes all those motorcycles. They really got what was coming to him. And seeing even stuff like that is just fun. It just feels like, ooh, yeah, this is what I'm all about.
I think again, this comes from Needham's desire, not only as a stuntman, but also he's a driver. He was involved with the World Speed Land Speed Record project for the Budweiser rocket, and which was driven by Stan Barrett, and the team failed to set the record actually, but their claims to have broken the sound barrier were disputed and stuff. But this guy was a speed junkie, and then also Burt Reynolds co-owned a Mach 1 racing team as well, and so these guys have a need for speed, if you will. These guys love going fast, and that's captured in the images and what you're talking about in the movie. I like how the stunts that you're talking about, like when they jump the bridge, they let it run long enough that you can see the car, like the car's taking a lot of damage on that. You can see it kind of bottom out and then bounce back up, and there's a realness to it. And shockingly, I've seen some reports say 4, but in the interviews with Hal Needham, he says they got 3 Trans Ams and to do this with, and they absolutely wrecked them and were taking them apart just to have one car barely going across the movie at the end, and the Bonnevilles that they got to do the sheriff's cars with as well. They only had 2 Pontiac Bonnevilles to beat those to shreds as well. Again, this is not a big budget. They made so much money they could have, but return on investment's massive for this movie. And so it's funny that, again, you have to do all this for real. One of those things that when you do the Fast and Furious, you can computerize it. You can swing the cameras around. You can have any angle you want. And so I could see somebody maybe coming back to this and saying, like, I don't know, it doesn't capture me as exciting and it has to lean more on its comedy. Maybe the action's not there as much, but I don't know. I think seeing them do all this stuff for real is pretty cool too. So maybe I have a higher appreciation for doing it real, but I don't know. I think those stunts hold up to me to this day. Again,
I think there's an element of danger, and maybe it's because I've sort of transitioned my career into insurance. I think about how there's not an airbag in the car. The seat belts, I don't think they're wearing them at any point in time. The roads don't have those rumble strips on the interstate. They're on either side. The guardrails are very, very minimal. There's not the cables, so there's the 70. And of course, everyone's smoking all the time too. So the element of safety is it's not anywhere to be seen in this movie.
And you mentioned the stunt where they drove out onto the athletics field there, Dustin. They hit a ramp and they actually did drive out onto a field. And I saw an interview with Burt Reynolds where he and Hal had planned out for things to work a certain way, but the grass was slipperier than they thought it would be, and they had a harder time controlling the car. And the dugout was like where they crashed into was a closer call than they thought. And more importantly, they were closer to the kids than they thought it was. And they got done with the shot. They captured everything they needed to. And they were really nervous. And they were like breathing out like, ugh. Like, and the kids were like, this is fun. Let's do this again. And they're like, no. Like,
I think we got it.
But then some of the mothers had come up to, Burt's like, those cars were close. I didn't realize they were going to be so close. And he's like, well, yeah, we're pretty good at this. We know what we're doing. We like to make it look realistic. And like in his head, it's nice to know that Burt Reynolds isn't actually this confident all the time. Right. He was saying, he was just like, whoo, that was close.
I loved that skidding stop in front of Carrie when she's in the road. That's really good. That was the one that made me realize, oh, this isn't just reckless or like huge budget. Like they must really know what they're doing, at least most of the time, because that looked incredible how close they got to her, whether it was a stand-in or her or not. There are certain things that like the trucks can't do too much, but some of the shots of like the oncoming traffic. What does Cletus say? Like, hey, you got to make your own lane. And we get some awesome, wherever they scoped out these highways with like a little dipped out sort of frontage road on the side that they could just, burn rubber down and you see all the dust clouds come up, or these country highways that they can turn off of. We have one of the cop cars going into a lake where, you just got somebody fishing there. It's really, really like a treat to see these things. I think I'm more interested in this story in total, and especially because of its simplicity, there's no conflict between Cletus and Bandit whatsoever. Not really. No. There's a hint of it early on when he says, hey, when I say 21 it means 19, and when I say 6 it means 3, and when I say 2 it means 1. Like, all right, good plan, Cletus. And then immediately Bandit says, how about we scratch that and do it my way? And there's a slight tinge of like, oh, does he not want to be second banana? But that's literally all you get. And because of that, you can focus on the friendship. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. A friendship is a true friendship in a movie is harder to pull off than a romance. Now we get both in this movie. So that gives it deserves its credit for that.
Ben, you were about to say something.
I don't remember what it was. that was good. I was thinking about some friendships in other movies too. That was great.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood had a good one. That friendship is a good one.
I liked watching him at the house with his wife, Snowman's wife.
Yeah, I was thinking that, he
Waynette.
Waynette, yeah. She had those curlers in. She looked like she Yeah, so there wasn't any skirmish or disdain for each other, but the Snowman's wife certainly did not like Bandit. I guess because he got locked away previously or something.
Yeah.
There's some
she's likely to get her husband in trouble. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Before we leave the stunts in total, do we have Mad Max without Smokey and the Bandit? Mad Max, the original, came out 2 years later, and Fury Road, speaking of practical cars, every single vehicle in Fury Road can be driven. None of that is like CGI. Those are all drivable cars. So, you mentioned the Bonnevilles and the Trans Am, and you think about the big rigs and all this, like, yeah, $4.3 million budget makes, what did you say, 1.5? Like it was so awesome to use what they had in store. But I feel as if like this is one of the things that will make sure it ensures that it will always hold up is the use of that kind of thing. And then we can't forget, Ben said it earlier, soundtrack, unbelievable, really feels fun. I made a couple of notes. You have the first time Buford T. Justice shows up and you've got those heavy horns playing, bomb, bomb, bomb. and then you've got an excellent like chase scene with some kind of fast brassy pops with a banjo behind it. And then with the fiddles behind it. And then we end the movie with, now I would say Charlie Daniels did it the best ever, but you end it with a rendition of the Orange Blossom Special. It is fantastic and really, really special soundtrack alongside these big, bright, wonderful, often violent scenes.
It's amazing what music can do to set the tone for your experience of the same thing. That's really important to get right. And Universal nearly got it wrong. Universal thought that the country score and soundtrack wasn't any good, didn't have any mass appeal. So they wanted to change it, and they replaced it with an orchestral score.
Oh man,
Hal Needham, who first-time director didn't have a lot to stand on, hated it and fought and told him to cut it and put the original score back in. And I gotta say,
Smart
Ben,
man.
can you picture this with an orchestral score?
not at all, not at all. Wow, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
All of a sudden, we've got James Bond music in the back.
The
Thinking of
more and more we do
Thunderball
these
soundtrack.
the more and more we do this podcast, you only hear about the bad ideas that the studio usually makes you do rather than the good ones that they save you from. Obviously, the director probably takes credit when it when it goes well, but I do hear a lot of really bad ones where it's just like the studio's like, got this idea, what about? And then it's always the worst idea ever.
Yeah.
And that seems to be right up there with this one. So
Wow.
Well, we are lucky to frequently do, I'm not going to call them passion projects per se, but we do movies where somebody says, give me this person or get me that person, or I only want it this way, or the studio told me that we had to do orchestral, and I'm going to say, no, we got to stick with this sound. And so we frequently do hear about the movies that we cover on the show, like when someone is being very particular about what they want. And what's great about that is that we get to see some great movies. But for every one of those, there's got to be 10 where somebody was being a little bit too reserved, or they'd put up some walls or boundaries and say, like, no, you can't change what I want to do. And it ends up being a movie that we've either never heard of or never will cover because it just wasn't successful.
it's amazing how if you have funny people and charismatic people, how little you need to do, just let the cameras roll. And I got to say, Hal Needham captures their personality in the movie really well. I mean, Ben, this doesn't even feel like a first-time director, does it?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's so many things that happen. Of course, he's got tremendous experience with stunts, but so many things that happen throughout this movie make you think they've done this plenty of times before. And I think, obviously the plot was very thin, but there's so many things that happen, both racing the clock, both falling in love, both being with your buddy, and making it about getting a beer run accomplished. I think there's a lot of levels to this movie that make it successful, and probably it's, along with the music, is why we love it.
I think the real focus could be on some pratfalls that he avoided, or some like issues that he avoided. You're right that it doesn't seem like a first time director, and there were some things that could have been overly done, and so he, like a careful stuntman, was not pushing it with like treading into territory he did not understand. And so there are certain things that I'll bring up in our next segment, certain things that I feel as if, oh, this could have so easily been poorly done, but instead the restraint from the director's side allowed us to have something simpler. Think about in the 21st century with the presence of a filmmaker like M. Night Shyamalan. With that presence, anybody that would attempt to make a thriller or a mystery might think, I need a Shyamalan style twist. And how many times is that going to lead to something poorly done? And in this case, our director did not need to like achieve something wild in terms of like a choice. He just did something basic. We've said it all. It's underwritten, thin plot, but it's still so enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Ben, what does the setting do for this movie? What is the secret sauce of the South?
Yeah, I think Dustin touched on it earlier. That the South, has that reputation of being a rebel. Not necessarily fully following the law. They try to get whatever advantage they can. The South is a wonderfully charming place. There's so many great places, great people, but I think in a lot of people's minds, they're a little bit of an underdog. And so anytime you could get an advantage at some sort of way,
Yeah, get one over.
Yeah, get one over on anyone or anything. I think they're looking to take advantage of that. But to me, it's just absolutely beautiful. I love the South. I love West Virginia. Is right on the edge of that where I live, and so we're the northernmost southern state and the southernmost northern state. Many people say, but the scenery is amazing, especially some of those very rural scenes and middle of nowhere interstate scenes. Just makes you want to be there racing with them.
A lot of it was filmed in Alabama, though they did go to Georgia as well. They said they were in other states like Mississippi, and they were still in Alabama. Forgivable. I don't notice it. It's funny. They had to reshoot a couple of things. Some of this, I'm about to California, you're Georgia, Ben, but some of this actually is done in California. I can't tell though. So, I mean, things are moving very quickly, and that is very forgiving.
The highways in the South, all the trees, all the green. I'm in Texas. It's mostly brown here. I got cedar and I got live oaks, and that's it. Trees aren't higher than 15 feet. Seeing that in movies it's really nostalgic. So it whoever it was that said like must watch if you're from the South, they weren't lying. There were certain things that I was kind of joking about, like Texarkana I've been to, or I guess I should say I've been through. You could not have filmed this on location in Arkansas because no vehicle can last on those roads. They are terrible, and Arkansas smells bad. Sorry, Arkansas listeners.
Well, I guess Texarkana is the geographical spot for this because it's one of the easternmost points of Texas along the highway. I don't know much about it. I've never been there. But.
It's along that northern highway that kind of touches where Arkansas is. If you were gonna like hit 40 through Tennessee, through Memphis, through Arkansas, and then like go towards Dallas, it does make sense for why that would be the easternmost place that they could pick up Coors beer.
Well, I felt like the name of the town was a perfect selection too because it tells you exactly where it is based on the
true.
Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana. Right?
Yeah. The one that drives me nuts is West Memphis, Arkansas. There's a separate city. There's Memphis, Tennessee, and then there's West Memphis, Arkansas.
Now, I'm not a car guy, as I mentioned earlier, but I would think if anybody is a car enthusiast, there's so much driving in this movie, that has to be a big appeal for this movie. Ben, what is it about the Trans Am?
I mean, what a cool car. It's got the T-top roof, open air the entire time. It's a big engine car, very light frame, can stop on relatively a dime and has all the speed and maneuverability that you'd want. And I think that, the Phoenix painted on the hood, it just
rad.
Adds to it. I mean, what a rad car. When they pulled the car, when Bandit pulled the car out of the back of the truck and Snowman sees it for the first time, I think I feel that way every time I see the car. I'd love to have one.
It's a great introduction to the car. It definitely gets a big moment. It's a good car commercial. Burt Reynolds was, again, promised a free Trans Am. He said, if this movie becomes a big hit and we sell a lot of Trans Ams, I'll get you one yourself. And obviously, this movie was more than a big hit. It was a smash hit, and Trans Ams were flying off the shelf the next year, and even more so 2 years off. So this was, obviously, the car was catapulted by this movie. And when it became a hit, Reynolds kind of expected the executives to come through with their promise. Not to be pretentious or whatever, but he kind of called them up one day and said, what about my Trans Am? And unfortunately, the executive who had made him that handshake promise retired, and the new executive said, nah.
I would have done it. I felt like Burt Reynolds should have deserved that Trans Am.
He did.
Car. I mean, he put him on the map. He made everybody want one. And to me, that's one of the most quintessential cars of the 1970s, right alongside Orange Challenger. That's a Duke Boys drive.
Russell, I'm laughing because I'm thinking of Norm Macdonald's Burt Reynolds, like walking up, chewing his gum with his big foam hat on, like in the executive's office. Like, yeah, you're about to you're about to get on Burt Reynolds' bad side, huh?
So where's my Trans Am?
Yeah, you're about to draw out the full ire of Burt Reynolds, are you?
You have it in contract? No, just give me one. Thanks.
Burt Reynolds asks for something. Burt Reynolds gets it.
Boy, it is an iconic car in all of film history because of this now. So,
well, I'm glad they chose that because I feel like the Trans Am is in that car becomes synonymous with, I feel like, a Southern working class crew. So I think that's an
excellent point. All right, what do you guys say we hand out some superlatives?
10-4.
All right, Ben, who's your MVP?
Well, it has to be Burt Reynolds. I mean, he makes the movie. I think he automatically earns the MVP for me when early on in the movie he's outrunning a cop and he breaks the fourth wall and just smiles right at the camera, right at the audience. You just know that this is your friend. This is going to be a fun movie. You know you're going to want to chase him, be along for the ride. So to me, this is no doubt MVP. Although Jackie Gleason, I think, is right behind him.
All right. It's funny you mentioned breaking the fourth wall. Somebody came up to Hal Needham, who was a first-time director, and said, "Woo, that's a That's a gutsy move. Breaking the fourth wall, and he just kind of went like, yeah, I liked it. And turned to somebody else and goes, what's he mean breaking the fourth wall?
Oh, wow.
He just thought it was nice. So
It's 1 second. It's just 1 second. Doesn't say anything, just a look. But man, that look is meaningful.
He didn't even think anything by it, but it was. It's funny how that is. Dustin, how about you?
I went with Hal Needham. I agree with the ensemble cast and the performances. There's a lot of gravitas, and that's great. But in total, especially having seen it as a boy and not really getting it, that to come back and say this is put together in this sort of special way that, though it might seem thin if you view it with a critical lens, is still just incredibly enjoyable. And I know sometimes we talk about rewatchability. This movie has it. So I'm giving it for the total package here, Hal Needham.
Ben's right. I'm going to go with Burt Reynolds as well. And it's his charisma that carries this movie. But not only that, he's the guy who made the movie something that was big, something that was marketable, something that could get more funds. And he brought the right people in. And, he was a stunt man himself. He was vying to try and do a lot of the stunt driving parts himself. And Hal was a stunt man and the actual stunt man who was in the movie, and he were all going back out machoing each other. It actually sounds like it would have been a very fun set to be part of there. So it's I guess out of Burt Reynolds' desire to work with people that he likes on a project that he likes, it's out of his passion that this comes true. And I do have to admit, I have given a hard look to Jackie Gleason as well. Ben was right. I mean, Jackie Gleason gets a lot of the most memorable parts for me and was very funny. This movie's called Smokey and the Bandit. This movie doesn't work without Smokey because he's so funny. He's just so funny.
Smokey Bear.
All right, Dustin, what's your best supporting?
Jerry Reed as Cletus Snowman. He seems so natural in that spot. There's, aside from getting beat up in the bar in which he gets his just desserts, he gets his revenge right away. Not too much bad happens to him, and that's nice and comforting to know that things are all right. He's him and Fred are just doing fine. Aside from Fred eating up all the leather inside of the interior because he's hungry. But yeah, he's just going along, and I think that's really good. Had the movie been more complex, then perhaps there might have been some conflict between him and Bandit, or also between him and Waynette, or something else. Maybe he says hey, why do you have this woman with us? You're compromising the mission. We were never really in fear that the mission's not going to be successful. I don't think so. Even in the last 20 minutes with the air support, Jerry Reed has kind of a calming effect. And it might be because at the time people would have really known him as oh yeah, a big time country singer, performer. But I think even if you don't have that context, he's still very comforting.
Does he get enough screen time, Ben?
I think it's just, yeah. I think he's a big enough star that he didn't need a whole lot. Every time he's there, he commands a lot of respect, and he would have been my second choice for best supporting actor. But yeah, I love Jerry Reed.
My best supporting actor is going to be Mike Henry, Mr. Tarzan himself as Junior. He is so funny. He doesn't say a lot, but his physical responses, his blank expressions, he conveys this dim-witted, lovable guy. And again, because he's getting beat around and jerked around by his dad, talked over, interrupted, and disrespected, and left at the altar, etc. Everything bad's happening to him, and no matter how mean his dad is, we still like Junior. And everything that Jackie Gleason doesn't work if he didn't have somebody else in the car with him. And he said, I need somebody in the car with me for this to work. And thankfully, everybody listened to him, because without Junior in there, this movie doesn't work either. It's a small little piece, but it makes it all come together so well. Ben, hidden gem.
Well, for me, I had to think a lot about this because I've, watched this movie so many times, it's hard to pick out a hidden gem. But I think we don't actually see anyone drinking any Coors beer in this movie. So to me, the nostalgia, the desire for that brand, the plot is to get Coors beer, but at no point in the movie do you actually see someone cracking open a can and enjoying it and showing you how much they enjoy it. It's more about the mystique of the Coors Light. So that was, I don't know that that's a really hidden gem, but that's something that I didn't really think about or appreciate until
Certainly
after
is.
watching
Right.
It certainly
They
is.
broke more bottles with a forklift than they did
Yeah.
drink.
That's true.
You're
To
right.
drive any forking thing.
They could have used a shot at the end of everybody having, you have Coors Light? Like, I'm shocked. Like, this movie is like, seems like it's dripping with product placement in the beginning, but based on what you just said, I'm sitting there going like, wow, whoever made this movie didn't monetize their Coors Light leverage nearly enough,
Maybe this has got to be Coors the banquet beer. I think this is before light beer was even a thing.
So interesting. No, that's a great point. Dustin, hidden gem.
I spoiled it earlier by saying the Orange Blossom Special fiddle song, which is known for being technically difficult, is a great ending piece. But because I brought it up earlier, of course, I always bring a backup. My backup is I am forever going to be on the hunt for a Diablo sandwich to have with a Dr. Pepper. Because the way he houses that thing, I can't tell. Is it chicken? I don't even know. But it's covered in some type of what must be a spicy sauce. That's my hidden gem. Still hidden to me. I hope to find it someday.
It looked like spicy bologna to me. I don't know about you.
Spicy bologna. Yeah, I guess it was kind of flimsy, but I also think that just in his paws, it was like falling apart.
I love it.
He did put it together real quick.
I'm going to go with Fred the dog. It's a very lovable dog, and again, it helps to have somebody in the seat next to you. So
That's
Snowman's not going to be as fun without his love of his dog. It's something endears you to him. He's thinking about him. He wants to get a meal for him, and he goes in the water to catch him and stuff like that. Somehow this is not a stunt dog, by the way. This is not a trained acting dog. They got this dog in Atlanta. They put an ad up in the paper that said they didn't have a dog, so Burt Reynolds is going to pick the dog out of a contest, and they had way more dogs show up than they ever thought possible. They had hundreds and hundreds of dogs. There wasn't a dog left in the pound. People would pick dogs up left and right, wanting to get Burt Reynolds, the real Burt Reynolds, to shake their hand and say, I want your dog in my movie. And it worked. He just put his hand over a basset hound and said, "My dog."
This one.
Recast. This is going to be hard for you, Ben, because I can tell you love this movie.
I think Big Enos left a lot to be desired. Sure, he had a lot of money, but you don't know where it came from. You don't know why he has it. He's got a great little sidekick or son. But I thought, what if it was, thinking back to the James Bond era or theme, what if we had like an evil, wealthy British financier behind this who just had a love for the banquet beer? I don't know exactly who. I was thinking maybe Anthony Hopkins at that time would have been fun, just to have another, big name in the movie. But again, how do you do a little Enos? How do you make Anthony Hopkins huge, and how do you have a little Enos around him? So,
Dustin, how about you?
I did not look up the name of the actresses, but there is the woman working at the truck stop who provides the Diablo sandwich and the couple of cheeseburgers, who sheriff comments on her rear end as she's walking away. There's some small bit female parts that they're fun, but I don't know how much, because the cast is so big and everybody is on screen for such a great amount of time. But I think if you could combine some of those smaller female parts and give the person who's at the truck stop, who's interacting with both Smokey and the Bandit here, if you could put like Betty White in there, someone who stands out as a larger part of the cast for that comedic scene, like cameo.
Okay. And I'm going to do a similar kind of line of thinking. I'm coming after Susie Ewing. There's nothing wrong with her. She's codenamed Hot Pants. She's the owner of the Choke and Puke who goes to help. There's nothing wrong with Susie Ewing at all. But what if it was Dolly Parton?
I almost went there.
Yeah.
I almost went to the Parton well.
Yeah. Well, it's already mandatory viewing for the South. Why not just push it over the edge by putting their queen in there? So
yeah.
Best shot, Ben.
Well, I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think to me it was the scene where the police cars are chasing the bandit, and all of a sudden one of them loses control and ends up on the back of a moving big rig that has this pulling an empty car hauler thing. So that, I guess they did that in 2 takes. They missed it the first time, and the second time they landed right on there, a little bit sideways, but it was enough. And he said, "I'm going to need you to pull off the next stop," and you hear 2 honks of the big horn. So I think that to me was just unbelievable to actually pull that off with a real car and a real human being. And think about, how movies are so CGI'd today. That's a real feat in and of itself. And I picked that over a lot of different things. Obviously the truck races in the beginning. There's the big finish. There's some beautiful scenes throughout. But to me, the authenticity of that stunt to me was just still unbelievable.
It's a great choice. Dustin, best shot for you.
It's a brief shot, but it is after they go on their little walk, and he says he only takes his hat off for one thing. She kind of asks permission. He says he wants to. Snowman hollers back at him over the CB, and you get the shot of the hat just wiggling ever so slightly on the antenna. And I thought that was kind of all you needed. Just a couple of sort of classic campy 70s kisses and just the movement of that hat.
I got a good one here. After Bandit and Frog get away across the stream, and the other cop car stalls out in the water, and they're pulling it out, then the very beat up Bonneville drives up with Sheriff Buford T. Justice climbing out of the car, and Junior's holding on his hat, and Junior continues to get out of the car and continues to hold his hat as he's walking towards them, and the camera comes from the car panning them both together with, again, my best supporting actor of Mike Henry walking there holding his hat, moving along the line, and his dad looks over to him, "Stop holding my hat." Like, it's the camera just emphasizes the movement of how far from the car they've come, and it again plays up how far there's no need to hold this hat up, and it's already funny before he says it, and watching him react is the payoff that you needed to have, that take your laugh that was already starting to come from 5 to 10. So I love it when a camera shot can make something funnier and how you capture the moment, and that's one of those things I like. Nobody picked this one, so it's worth mentioning. There's a scene where the sheriff's truck is banged into the front of Snowman's truck as he's passing him, and it wasn't supposed to happen quite like that.
Really?
Yeah, it was just supposed to. So he's going up for it and hit it, and then it kind of T-bones the car, like it kind of hits the car, and the stunt driver said when he got out of there pretty shaken up, he's like, the grill on that truck's a lot bigger at 50 miles per hour than it is here. So they kept the shot. It looks great in the movie. It is actually a good shot anyway, but the added action that wasn't necessarily scripted. Hal Needham said most of everything that they had on this went mostly as scripted. Again, they got a little close to some kids, which on the baseball field. Sorry, on the, yeah. So, but this was the one thing he said that wasn't supposed to happen, and he said in the end it kind of looked better. In the end, he's like, glad nobody got hurt. Best scene, Ben.
Well, this again, it was really hard to pick, but to me, it's the finale. I mean, they finally make it. They deliver the beer. You don't know, like, again, you don't see how they receive it. You don't see how they open it, but they made it. They got there on time, and they got their money. But instead, they chose double or nothing. Go get some clam chowder in Boston rather than collecting them, because they had so much fun on the chase. So to me, the finality of it was great. Knowing that they made it was awesome, and just made you want more. I'm ready to watch the second one.
Dustin, what's your favorite scene?
It's when they meet at the Choke and Puke.
Yep, this is mine too. Go ahead.
Okay, so I won't say too much, but because I want to hear what you have to say. But yes, it's very much needed. There are some instances in movies where our protagonist and the antagonist don't even meet. So when they meet, it also takes me back to last year where we were talking about the shop around the corner. When the meeting for the two characters is like rare, and as it is here, it's really electric. And the fact that one knew while the other didn't really just kind of makes you edge up on your seat a little bit. So I thought that was wonderful. Plus, the comedy of that scene was very good. It was very charming.
It was. I picked this one as well, Dustin, because a lot of the reasons that you said, but Jackie Gleason, another suggestion he made, said, we should do this scene. And they said, sure. So this wasn't written into the script. And he thought it would be funny to go in and not realize that he was coming down into a place in a hurry, with sitting right next to the bandit himself. And Burt Reynolds lays it on thick by, here, let me get the check. You're a hardworking man in the law and stuff like that. I mean,
for sure. And that's really generous. I mean, a Diablo sandwich and a Dr. Pepper, that's probably going to run you 75 cents.
So I also love, even just from the moment he comes in the door, he's like, what do you want to eat, Junior? He's like, I don't remember what he says, but he's like, it's too slow.
With hush puppies. We don't have time for that.
Yeah, so,
Well, I also thought it was funny that he thought he caught the bandit earlier in the movie, but it ended up being the sheriff in a roadside brothel of a different
That's right.
county. So
that was good.
Oh.
That was very good. Best wardrobe or makeup moment? Very Southern, very 70s, Ben. What's it going to be?
Oh, well, everyone knows that Burt Reynolds' mustache was the star of the show. It's Burt Reynolds and then his mustache. But to me, the very hard to see thing, unless you have an HDTV, was Buford T. Justice, the sheriff, had a tiny little pencil-thin mustache there. And I don't know where that came from or what the idea was behind it, but it seemed to me very New York Italian or something like that. But how in the world, even the craftsmanship of it, how in the world do you get a mustache that thin? I can't imagine trying to cut one for me, but I thought that was so cool.
Wow, yeah.
It's a good one. Dustin, how about you?
Sometimes the clothes are simple. Han Solo's clothes are simple, and so are the bandits. The just very simple clothes: red shirt, cowboy hat. If you were to dress someone up as the bandit, I'd say 90% of the South would know what you're doing. Now, the mustache would help, but it's not unique, really. But I think if you put that ensemble together, everyone knows what you're doing. So it's actually just Burt Reynolds' whole thing.
It's so fitting too, the bright red shirt. He's trying to draw the heat off of this car. It's kind of like
That's
the
right.
red,
The
the red.
blocker.
Exactly. That's kind of like the red that you wave in front of the bull to take all the attention away. So it's very fitting that he wears something as flashy and it's very simple. But contrast that to like what Snowman's wearing. Super 70s life preserver vest kind of thing, orange bell bottoms. I mean,
Real bell bottoms. Yeah.
Yes, they are belled all the way. So, good point. I mean, and you can see that. Look here. Now you can see me over here, and now you don't. So that's conveyed in the wardrobe too. So my choice is going to be I like bell bottoms. I do. And Sally Field rocks the bell bottoms in a more serious way. Like I like her bell bottoms. So there was a mid 90s or late 90s kind of revival of some 70s things. It may have come from that 70s show coming back. So some of the ladies when we were younger would wear bell bottoms, and I liked it. So seeing Sally Field wear the bell bottoms made me happy as well, and it made Snowman happy too. He said she got a cute butt. So
yeah, I wasn't going to mention it until you did, but with certain time periods, certain things are risque, certain things are not. They didn't push it with the sex appeal or the fan service, but I believe there is a cut back to the passenger seat, and it's when she's kind of leaning back in the car, and the camera is just on her derriere, and he's kind of peeking over. Like that doesn't. This is another instance where they didn't do too much. Where we're looking at Hal being like a little restraint here. While she's changing out of her dress, they could have done something more skin or something, and they didn't. And that's great. Whenever you can see a little restraint, well done.
Yep, and suitable for TV, as you would say. So change one thing, Ben. If you had to change one thing, what would it be?
Man, this was hard again too. I don't know that there's anything I would change. The only thing I wish is there was more. I wish maybe there was more to the plot. I don't know. Maybe there was another. We get two versions of the Eastbound and Down. There's a Westbound and Down version of the song when they first start out. But I don't know. There's not a whole lot I would recommend changing, and I really couldn't come up with a good answer for this one. So I love the movie so much that I'm happy with where it is.
I like it. Well, Dustin, how about you? Change one thing.
I would explain the Enos's desire for the Coors beer a little bit more. Or have them in some way. They're not evil. We know that. They're just, there's a challenge.
They're eccentric rich guys.
But with the way that they're presented, you might think, oh, these guys, if they're rich, they're probably up to something, and they're not. The only challenge really there is that they'll bet with each other as to whether or not they're successful or not. The movie is so incredibly simple that it has room to add a tad more complexity. I'd love to see if there was some connection with local law enforcement as to all right, they made it all the way back here, and then the trap is set. They're going to capture them, and they get their beer. They don't have to pay. Does this make sense? where they're working together with the law to both get what they want, which is the shipment of Coors beer. The law gets bootleggers. Like that could be, if I were the mastermind here, that's probably what I would have done. The movie's too simple and fun for that, and that's okay.
I might have overwritten it myself because as soon as you said, what would you do? My head started turning. My head instantly went to pay 3 bandits at the same time and said, whoever gets back with the coolest beer first
That's great.
gets the $80,000, and you can have some other side stories and some other calamities, sabotage each other, etc.
Yep.
Going on, and it turns into a bit of like Rat Race or something like that. So,
But I do want to say that is what I would do if I had to. It's not something I think must be done.
well, I think we can write another movie because if we've proven with Superbad and this now, we could just going for beer is a good idea for a movie. So screenwriters, pay us money and we'll write this for you. So might change one thing is going to be, I want to see Jerry Reed play some music.
Oh, smart.
Like I want to see him pick up the guitar. It could just be on his porch at home. Or it could be maybe a truck stop. Maybe that, maybe the guys who at the motorcycle bar or whatever say, oh, this guy plays a really mean guitar. And he's like, nah, I don't know. I'm in a hurry. He's like, just one song. And then have him rock the house. So,
well, in Smokey and the Bandit 2, you do get country music singer Don Williams doing exactly that. He plays in one of the biker bars. So.
It's maybe the Blues Brothers, which I love, might be channeled through this movie, by the way. I love the Blues Brothers, and I don't know that you get that without this, by the way, Dustin.
Exactly.
So.
Dude, I was thinking that. What kind of music you play in this place? Oh, we got both kinds. Country and Western.
so that's my change one thing. Best quote, Ben.
Well, for me, it's not just a quote. It's the entire sub-language of the CB radio. There's so many great quotes that come from that. Stop and put some, stop at the choke and puke, put some groceries down my neck. You got to stop and get some go-go juice, things like that. And
yeah,
you got peanut butter in your ears, things like that. There's a bear in the air, Smokey all over the place. So that's, the whole trucker language is my favorite. That's what makes the movie.
All right. Dustin, how about you?
Mine's a little long, so bear with me here. Now, you boys just stay here and watch the car. There might be some vandals around that might want to steal something. So you boys just stay here and keep your hands on the car until one of my associates arrive. And don't go home. And don't go to eat. Don't touch yourself. That wouldn't look nice on my highway. You can think about it, but don't do it. That's weird. That is a weird scene. It is right after his introduction, but it is weird. I thought that like Posse was kind of involved, but like he's just, it shows a little bit of his comedic menacing. But even still, it was just like, wow, that kind of came across strange. But it just adds to how much you enjoy that character.
Well, we've said a lot of my favorites ones through this one, but one that made my jaw drop is like, there's no way you came from my loins. Right. As soon as I get home, first thing I'm going to do is punch your mama in the mouth. And that is so good. I did really like the fact that, that you're a sheriff that's not germane to the situation. Oh, the Don German's got nothing to do with it. What do you say?
He also says something very early on about how like, oh yeah, this bootlegging business, when they talk about this or that, and it's just straight communism. Like this guy is clueless, or what? It adds to his charm. I'm very pleased with how they end up with this mishmash of just unlikable. That's just so fun to have on screen.
Ben, we've come full circle. On a 5-star scale, half-star intervals, what would you rate Smokey and the Bandit from 1977?
I give this movie a solid 4 stars. I wanted to give it a 5-star because I love it so much. But there's still, like I said, there's still a couple things that I believe could be stronger. We wish we had a stronger plot. I wish we tasted the Coors beer. I wish we got more out of the Enuses. And but again, there's so much to it. This movie is a timeless classic for me, especially knowing and loving the South, knowing and loving Trans Ams, and just the Burt Reynolds star that he is. We just love him, Jackie Gleason. What a great cast. What great entertainment. To me, it's now I'm talking myself up. I think I'm gonna give it 4.5. 4.5 stars for this. 4.5 out of 5. I know there are plenty of movies that are better. There's thousands of movies that are probably better than this, but I just love it. It's so fun. It's so easy to watch, and I can watch it again and again. There's some movies you don't want to watch more than once or twice. I could watch this one 100 times.
I love it when someone comes on the show and talks themselves up mid review.
There you go.
That's one of my things that just like, I don't know why I like that so much, but I'm just like, it's almost like one of those things like, but that's not all.
Well, I felt bad. I love this movie. How do you give it a 80%? So, no.
Absolutely. Dustin, how about you?
I'm going to mimic what he said with 4 stars, his original star count. I think I would be excited to share this movie with people who had not seen it, especially being from the Deep South. I don't think for all it's a must watch, but if you like cars or you like driving movies or you like movies centered on the South, if you were to like create a subcategory of that alone, it's a 5-star movie. For general audiences, I think it's 4 stars. I think that's fair, but very enjoyable for me. We did, I'll mimic Ben again here. I think it could be deeper. I think there could be a little bit more, not just more laughs and hilarity and cuteness. There should be a bit of complexity to it, I think. But as is, 4 stars.
My expectations were greatly exceeded. I knew about Smokey and Bandit as a title, and I never necessarily had this was not on my high to watch list necessarily. And I remember when we covered Star Wars, looking down, seeing like the number 2 movie on the box office that year and going like, huh, really? And this has been an eye-opening experience. So I've had a lot of fun with this. I'm going 4 stars as well. And I think this is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I think it holds up better than I thought it was going to be. I just expected a lot of cars and racing around, maybe a kind of Fast and Furious movie with some little more yucks from the 70s, but this is different. It's its own thing, and I really like it. So I think, to your point, Dustin, it may not be the complexity, but I don't want to undersell a movie for just flat out being fun and putting a smile on your face and enjoying it. I actually think that increases its rewatchability. I think that I'm likely to watch this again.
That's awesome. I don't watch a whole lot of movies. I'll be honest. I watch Disney movies, I watch documentaries, and that's about it. But I keep coming back to this one, and it's really kind of satisfying to me having. I don't know. I'll say I introduced this movie to Russell, but I don't know about you, Dustin, but I'm glad that I got you guys to watch it because I've loved it for, at least for me, for almost 2 decades. So this is great. This is great. I love hearing movie critics love the movie that I love.
By the way, Alfred Hitchcock is as great of a filmmaker and high-end of a director as he has been. This was one of his most guilty pleasures that he really enjoyed watching over and over again. His daughter said that they enjoyed watching Smokey and the Bandit a lot. So
that's awesome.
Even the seriousness of Alfred Hitchcock, loved this movie. So
I gotta add one more thing there too. You ever see, either in movies or in real life, there's the idea of like your dad or your uncle or your grandpa, where it's like, yeah, we're gonna go out to have sushi. We're gonna go have Korean barbecue, and like that character or your dad himself might like turn to, what are you gonna have? You're gonna have uncooked fish, and you realize that like some of the, we'll say, the avant-garde stuff of the film world is our high price, downtown restaurant type of menu. Smoking the Bandit's meat and potatoes. Sometimes that's what you want. And I think that's why I would come back to this.
Absolutely. Some of the best meals that you can get on this Southern themed episode is a $6 barbecue.
I got to find me a Diablo sandwich.
In a little paper cardboard container,
Well, I'll tell you what, Russell, because we're talking food, I'm getting hungry. Feeling like for next week we ought to pick a movie about the hunger. We're going to pick a movie from cannibalistic movies. Are you ready?
I am ready. Yeah.
This is wild. Okay, I got 3 options for you. Option 1, The Hills Have Eyes, 1977. On the way to California, a family has the misfortune to have their car break down in an area closed to the public and inhabited by violent savages ready to attack. Option 2, Ravenous, from 1999. In a remote military outpost in the 19th century, Captain John Boyd and his regiment embark on a rescue mission which takes a dark turn when they are ambushed by a sadistic cannibal. And option 3, Wrong Turn, from 2003. Chris and a group of 5 friends are left stranded deep in the middle of the woods after their cars collide. As they venture deeper into the woods, they face an uncertain and blood-curdling fate. What are we going to do?
Well, I'm not going to perpetuate the West Virginia, the bad West Virginia stereotypes with Wrong Turn. So I'm going to do Ravenous from 1999. Let's do something else. So.
All right. I think I'm on that one, so looking forward to it.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate having you on.
Hey, what an honor to be here. You guys are wonderful. I certainly enjoyed the podcast, and it's great to share my favorite movie with guys who love and study movies all the time. What an honor. Look, I hope you guys invite me back sometime. This is great.
Thank you. And thank you all the lords, ladies, and gents of the Retro Movie Roundtable. We invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. So please subscribe, rate, review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And give us a like on Facebook, Instagram, follow us on Twitter at @movie_retro. Email the show at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. And producing and providing this podcast is fun, but not free. So we invite you to support the show at our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/retromovieroundtable. All contributions are much appreciated and go towards making the show better for you, the listeners. As always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Dustin?
I knew peace only when I killed. And when I heard her heart in that terrible rhythm, I knew again what peace could be.